Welcome to EO Talks, Eastern Oregon's very own talk show, only here on EOAlive.
Say your name and tell us what office you're running for.
I'm Bill Sizemore, and I am running in the Republican primary for nomination for governor.
What do you do professionally?
Well, I'm a general contractor, and I have about 14 employees, and I have William L. Sizemore Construction and Painting, but I also own Bill Sizemore Painting, where we paint houses inside and out, apartment complexes, light commercial, and I have like a $70,000 computerized spray booth where we spray really professional finishes on kitchen cabinets, that sort of thing. So I've been running a business and keeping people on staff and having payroll for some time, so I'm familiar with the struggles of small businessmen and women.
Can you tell us more about your political background?
Well, I have been involved in politics since 1980, where I ran for the state Senate in 1980 just on a whim because the guy in my Senate district and down in Portland in the Mount Tabor area was running unopposed in the primary and the general. And he was automatically going to be elected because he put his name in the hat. And I wasn't even a registered voter at the time, but that just didn't seem right to me that there would be no challenger. So I put my name in and had to do a write-in campaign because the election was 4 days later. There was no time to even to get on the ballot. So I did that in 1980. Lost. I got 44%, which in Multnomah County, in Portland, and kind of inner city Portland, it was extraordinary at the time. That's very heavy Democrat registration there. And then in 1993, I started Oregon Taxpayers United, which grew to be a 21,000 member taxpayer organization. And we placed about 25 measures on the ballot. I cut taxes by $10 billion, maybe closer to $15 billion. And I did all kinds of measures that pretty much set the political agenda for the state of Oregon for quite a few years, and was written up about that in places like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, San Francisco Chronicle, all around the country, interviews on ABC World News at Night, things like that. So I probably did 10 television, radio interviews per day for a decade and was very, very high profile. And then in 1998, I ran against John Kitzhaber for governor, mostly because no one else would. He was very popular. The economy was booming. I think he had like 75% favorabilities with the voters. So when I put my name in, it was because nobody else would run. I just wanted to debate the guy. I was looking forward to doing that. We debated 6 or 7 times on TV mostly, and I did well. I'm very experienced at debating. At one time, in fact, I debated pretty much everybody that was anybody in Oregon in politics, from the governor, the secretary of state, the attorney general, state treasurer, the superintendent of public education, the heads of all the public employee unions, which were my sworn enemies, and many of the high profile mayors and counties, the presidents of public employee unions. So I was regularly challenging them to intellectual battles on issues and their efforts to increase taxes, while my job representing the taxpayers of Oregon was to lower taxes or at least keep them from being increased. So, but the measures I put on the ballot were everything from property tax cuts to state income tax cuts. I have done measures to require that schools keep the best teachers when they have layoffs, not just the ones with the most seniority, just things that were for the benefit of kids. English immersion for immigrant students, so that kids that come here from other countries and don't speak English, they have a chance to succeed. If they're going to be here, they need to have a chance to succeed. And learning English is probably the highest priority for them to be able to do that and assimilate into society. But all kinds of measures. I think the ones I was attacked most on were the PERS measure, which the Oregonians passed, and the Supreme Court, all of whom were on PERS, immediately threw it out. And I did one protecting private property rights, called requiring what I call just compensation for regulatory takings of private property, so that if government put a restriction on the use of your property, and that restriction had the effect of reducing the value of your property. Say you had a buildable lot, and they said, we're going to make that a set aside for environmental reasons or wildlife refuge or scenic set aside, that they make your lot unbuildable. Well, you just lost probably 90% of the value that you'd had invested in that property. And my measure said, well, if they're going to put a restriction on the use of your property after you bought it, they have to either remove the restriction or pay you compensation equal to the loss in value. Just a kind of a pro-private property rights measure. I put a lot of other measures, no new taxes or fees without voter approval, and measures that stop the unions, public employee unions, not private sector unions, from taking money out of employees' politics, out of their paychecks for politics without getting permission first. And they they've tried to kill me for that one because, frankly, that's the lifeblood or the supply line of the Democrat Party in Oregon is the public employee unions' money that they take using the public payroll system, which they have no right to use for politics, and they take from employees without getting their permission. That's how they feed the Democrat machine in the state. And when I started going after that issue, and 3 times I put one measure on, it got I think twice I got 49.6% after the other side spent $10 or $15 million fighting it. And once I started doing that kind of measure, they decided that was enough. They were going to get rid of Bill Sizemore, whatever they had to do so. But this time I've declared. I waited a while to get in this race. Bud Clark is running. Bud Pierce is running. Bud Clark's no mayor of Portland. Bud Pierce is running, and he talks a good conservative line, but I don't consider him to be truly a conservative. And so I have. There was another guy in, Stan Pulliam, and Stan kind of had a major setback when we did an article revealing some of his past history on things that were most people would, at least most conservatives would consider improper. And I don't think any of the candidates really have the fight and the ability to do what's going to have to be done to turn this state around. So here I am.
Can you tell me more about your biography?
Well, I was born and raised in the Olympic Peninsula, and in a logging community. And people were all around me were truck drivers and log truck drivers, and worked in the mills. I worked in the green chain in the plywood mills, and I set some chokers, and I did a lot of before I started painting houses. I did a lot of things that were just purely manual. Worked on a dairy farm, milked 57 cows every day, and then in 1972, I left Washington, and I moved to Oregon to go to Bible college at Portland Bible College, and I graduated from there in 1976. And so I have quite a lengthy history of things that I've done. I started carpet stores in Portland for a while. I did not do well at that. And I manufactured, designed some toys and made those, sold to most of the major chain stores in America, and did that for about 9 years. And then in 1993, I started Oregon Taxpayers United, which I've already talked about, and built up a 21,000 member taxpayer organization. I bought a radio station and half of another radio station in Portland. And I did, for 4 years, I had the Bill Sizemore show on in the mornings. It was on 11:50 a.m. Before Rush Limbaugh got on, because no person doing a talk or news show wanted to compete with Rush Limbaugh, and for good reason. And so after that, I started getting involved, and after I started getting involved in politics and doing the radio thing, I've kind of been in public life. Never elected to anything until I ran against John Kitzhaber in '98. That was the first time I really got known. Actually, at the time, I had 93% name ID throughout the state. But now I'm married. I've been married for 32 years, same woman, and we have 5 kids that we raised and 8 grandchildren, most of them quite young for my age. And I'm 70, and I've been a pretty young 70, and I'm still very active, and I can still climb a 32-foot ladder and spray a house when they need somebody up there. But I've living in Redmond, Central Oregon. I've lived in Klamath Falls as well. I spent nearly 40 years in the Valley, in the Portland area. And so I've kind of been around Oregon for long enough now, 50 years, that I'd say I pretty well belong here.
Can you tell me more about your community?
Well, Redmond's a little, I think, haven for people that have, more conservative values. They are, it's a pretty conservative, we call ourselves flag city. When they have a holiday here, there are more flags than you can count. All the major cities have flags, not very far apart, lining all the cities. And it's a great community. They have some amphitheater type facilities where they'll have concerts in the park, and and tons of people come out and bring blankets and lawn chairs, and it's a great place to live. I like the environment, and I can, from my side of my house, from the whole west side of my house, I can see from Mount Bachelor to Three Sisters and Black Butte, and even Mount Washington and Mount Jefferson. So I've been here a total of about almost 10 years now, and I love Central Oregon.
What Oregon issues are you going to focus on in your campaign?
Well, that's a good question, because Oregon's become a national laughingstock. I say to all of our embarrassment. I mean, I'm not laughing at it, but the country is. With all of the riots that we had over 100 days in a row, where the local leaders were so feckless and so weak and so soft on crime that they would let Antifa types pillage and burn and loot, and they would do nothing about it. In fact, they'd call those peaceful riots or peaceful protests when they were the opposite. And that's the kind of thing I will never let happen. Antifa will not be allowed. The people will go to jail, and they won't be let out by some soft on crime Portland or Multnomah County district attorney. And I look at the homeless situation, and I'm kind of torn on the issue in the sense that I know that there are people that are homeless through no fault of their own, and I would be happy to lend a hand to help people get into housing. But there are a lot of people that are homeless. People don't believe this. They say, no one would choose this lifestyle. Well, baloney. They do. They like living in a tent and having no responsibilities whatsoever, and they go out in the street corner and beg for money that they use to buy drugs. And the people that are on drugs and are homeless, that are have mental illness issues, those people, we should offer them a hand, offer them help, offer them choices. But one choice we won't offer them is to trash the city and camp out on the sides of highways and streets and in neighborhoods where drugs are rampant and crime is rampant, because those people aren't working and they either are begging or stealing, and they will admit that they beg or steal in order to provide them for themselves. And the total number of issues that Oregon is facing is pretty lengthy. The congestion in the Portland area, I don't just focus on Portland. A lot of voters there, that's an issue, but it's kind of the heart of the state, and not just economically, but even culturally and whatnot. And they have very different values, a lot of people over there do, than the rest of the state. And I have the advantage of understanding how people in Eastern and Central and Southern Oregon think and feel versus the people in the Valley. And I don't like them making us just their playground, and the decisions that those voters make that have effect on ranchers and farmers and people who live east of the mountains, very negative consequences for their lives. And as governor, I would be, if we still have a Democrat legislature, which I pray we don't, the pendulum does swing on that issue and it goes back and forth. But if we do, they should be prepared that I will veto the kind of garbage that they do that is absurd and shows that they don't understand people, except for city people. But there's a lot of issues, and the legislature's talking about they need to reform Oregon's property tax system. Well, I basically wrote the property tax system we have today, and the reason we have a 3% cap on annual increases of assessments is because of my measure. And people think the property taxes are high. Well, the average person would probably be almost double what they are now if it wasn't for my measure. And the average homeowners probably saved, since my measure first passed, $25,000, $35,000, just average people. And I will guarantee to the legislature that when they try to do tax reform that results in increases in property taxes, that I will veto them. But there are a lot of other issues. The very, very, very poor forest management that's led to the catastrophic fires. I will change our approach to forest management so that we are not leaving just everything a big tinderbox and ready to explode into fires that are out of control because we have let the environmentalists stop us from even being wise in the way we handle our natural resources.
Who is your favorite Oregon historical figure?
Well, I saw that you're going to ask that question, and I really had a hard time with that one because there's a lot of people that I've admired. Very few of them have ever become famous, but there were people that were very courageous. Guys like Bob Tiernan, who helped me do the PERS measure, and he and I suffered lots of death threats, and we were smeared nonstop for that. And so I admired Bob. I didn't always agree with him on everything. And Eileen Qtub, a state legislator from, I think, kind of the Wilsonville area. I liked her. But the people that most people look at, if you look at my website, you'll see, if you go to friendsofbillsizemore.com, you'll see a picture of me there in 1980 standing in Vic Atia's office together. He was quite a bit shorter than I am, but Vic he nominated me or appointed me to a governor's task force on workers' compensation reform way back in 1980. And but I am not an Atia kind of or a Mark Hatfield kind of Republican. Those guys were what they would call moderates. I would call them center-left Republicans, and I'm not that kind of Republican. And so most of the big famous Republicans are people that I didn't really wholeheartedly agree with. So I think I'll have to leave it at that.
What do you consider to be the primary source of your personal values?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that question. I didn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. What do you consider to be the primary source of your personal values?
Oh, well, I was raised by a Christian mother who read me Bible stories from the time I was a little kid. And I don't mean like, flannel graph kind of lightweight Bible stories. It was kind of adult version of them. And so, and I was in church all my life growing up. And I have respect for people of other values, and people that don't believe the same way that I do. But I graduated from a Bible college. I actually was a professor at a Bible college for a couple of years, taught Old Testament history and basic doctrine, and taught several other classes since then. So I would say my values basically come from basic Christian beliefs, and I have not wavered on those. I don't believe in shoving your religion down other people's throat, but if anybody asks me, I'd say, yeah, I'm a Bible-believing Christian. Jesus Christ saved my soul and forgave my sins, and I'm expecting to be in heaven in the end. But I think I'd have to say that I've read a lot of the Austrian School of Economics guys and the conservative guys like Hayek and Milton Friedman, some degree. I really like and have been influenced by the writings of guys like Thomas Sowell from the Hoover Institute, who's written books that explain philosophically why the right and the left are always at odds, and because they come from two different worldviews that are colliding, and they believe completely different things about people and whether man is fallible or not, whether he is basically good or is a fallen creature with a propensity for evil, which is essentially what the founding fathers believed. And the reason they set the form of government we have today is that they could wrap the government in the chains of the Constitution, because power would corrupt and absolute power would corrupt absolutely. And so they had separation of powers and limitations that are entitled to protect rights. And I think absent from that, we would no longer have gun rights in America or in Oregon even. And we would not have the values of free speech and free press that we have today. And so I really like Thomas Sowell and his writings, and they've influenced me and helped shape, not just shape my values, but help me to explain better what I believed and why.
Now, do you anticipate any criticisms from your opponents, and do you have any responses for those potential criticisms?
Yeah, on my website, friendsofbillsizemore.com, which is up now, but it's not complete. It's up and functioning, and people can volunteer and donate and that sort of thing and read about what I want to do and why. But I'm preparing a page that's entitled Lawsuits and Prosecutions. Not many candidates have to do that. But when people when they hear about my background, where I've even had tax evasion charges filed against me by the state of Oregon, they think, well, how can this guy run for governor? Well, they need to understand that the more effective you are as a conservative in politics, the more desperate the radical left will be to take you out. And I've been very effective. And I've cut taxes by a lot, and I've kind of set the agenda for the state for quite a while. That's what I was doing, was setting the political agenda. So the Democrats, the leftist Democrats anyway, had to play defense. They couldn't go do the kind of things they wanted to do. Instead, they had to play defense against the measures I was placing on the ballot. So they, at one point, I was saddled with over $4.4 million judgment to the teachers union. No trial, no finding of me guilty, no chance to defend myself. I wasn't even a party or defendant in the case. And I got stuck with a $4.4 million personal judgment. And some leftist Portland judge gave that to the teachers union so they would have authority or leverage over me to try to force me out of politics. And in fact, the teachers union came to me, and this was illegal, and they did it with the Department of Justice and attorney with them, and in front of a judge. And they offered, look, Bill, you owe us $4.4 million. You don't have $0.4 million. We don't want $4.4 million. We just want you to go away. If you'll agree to stay out of politics for 16 years, sign an agreement, stay out of politics for 16 years, we will forget the $4.4 million. I turned them down. I eventually got the judgment overturned. But that wasn't enough for them. And so one day they showed up and they, with indictments for tax evasion for my wife and I. Well, we had not filed our tax returns under advice of counsel and counsel with several attorneys, because the attorney general and the teachers unions, who were joined at the hip, had stood up in court and said falsely, totally falsely, that I'd taken $850,000 out of this nonprofit I was running. Well, the organization only spent about $550 its entire existence, so it was absurd. But I was advised, don't file your tax returns until we settle this issue. In the meanwhile, pay your estimated taxes, which were more than $50,000, which I paid. And so they showed up at my doorstep and indicted my wife and I for felony tax evasion, for filing. And eventually they changed it to filing late instead of tax evasion. They left that title on the case, but the charges were changed to late filing or not filing your state tax return. Only person in Oregon ever prosecuted for filing their tax returns late. But here, let me just tell you this: people won't believe this because this will sound like a third world banana republic, what I'm going to tell you. But it's a matter of record, so it's not anything I could lie about and get away with. But they came to me, the chief counsel for the state of Oregon and the prosecutor, and said, "Look, Bill, we're not after your wife. We're after you. Your wife's just an innocent spouse. But if you'll plead guilty to these 3 felonies, we'll drop the charges against your wife. But if you don't plead guilty, we're going to charge her with additional crimes," which was totally, the whole thing was bogus. But that's what they did. And then I didn't plead guilty, but they eventually chickened out. And after a year or so, they dropped the charges against my wife. And I'm prepared to go to court and prove my case of why I didn't file my tax returns. I wasn't trying to evade anything. And this was just political persecution. And about a week before the trial, the judge rules. Now, again, you won't believe this, but it's true. She says, Mr. Sizemore will not be allowed to put on any defense whatsoever. He will not be able to testify as to why he didn't file his tax returns. He will not be allowed to tell the jury that he paid estimated taxes. He won't be able to have his lawyer or accountant testify as to what they advised him and why. If Mr. Sizemore tries to put on any defense whatsoever, we will find him in contempt of court and declare a mistrial. And I know that doesn't sound like they could do that, but that's what they did. And so I was given no choice. I pled guilty, and then the judge retroactively changed the charges or the judgment to misdemeanor treatment. But people say, well, that's how can you run for governor with having that in your background? Well, that's really a badge of honor. They did that to me because I was effective and I was hurting their agenda, and they wanted to make sure that I was out of politics. They couldn't bribe me out, and they couldn't sue me out. One time they were suing me for $18 million, and they eventually dropped that case as well. But they went on for, I don't know, a year and a half. So I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on attorney fees. And but the criticisms I have received for those things, people should look at that. Conservatives should look at that and say, now that's a guy that we want in our corner who's taken that kind of abuse, and literally it was abuse, and has stood up to it and has fought through it. That's a guy that's not going to back down they're not going to back down to Antifa. He's not going to back down to the public employee unions or the Democrats in the legislature. And so those are the attacks I will probably get levied against me the most. And my answer for them is as stated.
So our first question is ducks or beavers?
Well, my wife lived in Eugene and my daughter went to Oregon State, and I am a duck football fan and a beaver baseball fan because I like to win. And the Ducks win more football games, but I like the Beavers. I like them all the way around. And basketball, I don't really care about.
Gotcha. All right. What is your favorite place in Oregon?
My favorite place? Well, my favorite place I couldn't tell you about because then you would go there, people would go there and it wouldn't be favorite place. But I like to go deep into the forests where there's moss hanging from the trees and it's complete solitude and a little stream beside me. And I've found several places like that. I've harvested my share of nice big bucks and bull elk, and I've hunted with deer. I've hunted with bow and rifle, and I like the solitudes of the forest. But I like climbing up on one of the mountain peaks, and I like Smith Rock, which is like 10 minutes from my house, and I climbed that many times. But I like the outdoors in Oregon the most.
Alrighty. What is your favorite Oregon beer?
Well, you cut out again. Oh, Oregon beer.
What is?
Yeah. I'm not a big beer drinker. I don't like heavy stout beers like some people do. If I'm going to drink a beer, which I don't drink very often, but when I do drink a beer, I like the blonde or lighter beers. If it was just off the shelf, I would have a Coors Light. But if I get something that's microbrewed, I still go with the pretty lightweight ones.
Gotcha. What is your favorite place?
You cut out when you said it again. My favorite what?
Your favorite place in Eastern Oregon?
Oh, in Eastern Oregon. Well, I think Smith Rock. You can go up there and sit and you can see out over the valley. You can even see where Phil Knight lives, the Nike guy, from up there. And we've climbed that many times. My wife and I will take a picnic lunch, maybe and go up there and sit there and just kind of look around, almost 360 views. And when I lived in Klamath Falls, I would go I'd go climb up on the rim rock and sit with my legs over the edge and just look out over the basin and all the fields that were green with alfalfa. You'd think they would dry up in the summertime. They irrigate those, and that's just beautiful green up there. And from my place there, you can see all the way to Mount Shasta. And I enjoy the outdoors and the scenic stuff. And I love when you come home and there were a lot of deer. I come home and there might be 35 deer in my yard. And some people would hate that. It means you can't have arborvitaes or roses. But I love seeing the wildlife and occasional elk pass through. And I've even had a mountain lion growl at me from less than 10 feet in the night. And, which is a little intimidating, but I love the outdoors and I've seen lots of bear and lots of game, and I love that.
Do you have any final thoughts to share with our viewers? And can you let them know how they can get in contact with you?
Well, if you go to friendsofbillsizemore.com, you can sign up to volunteer or get involved. I expect to win this race. Now, that may sound presumptuous considering the Republican has not won for 30 years. Vic Attia was elected back in the early 80s. But there is a path this time that has not existed before. Betsy Johnson, a Democrat from Scappoose, up above Portland, is running as an independent, or not independent, actually unaffiliated. She has millions of dollars already, and she's going to make it a three-way race. And I believe the result of that will be that a Republican will have the best chance they've had of winning. People know me. I have a track record that's for being a conservative, across the board, solid, totally dependable, never wavering, and I'm very easy to talk to, very easy to get along with. I smile easily, and my enemies would say, "Bill, you're so nice. How can you be a Republican?" Well, sorry, but I'm nice even to people that I don't like. Or don't like them and don't like their political views, and I'm willing to talk with them. I just don't I just don't make compromises that you don't have to make in politics. My job would be to move the ball down the field in the direction of limited government, lower taxes, law and order, private property rights, that sort of thing, and stop environmental extremism. I love the environment as much as anybody, as you've heard. I love streams and clean air and wildlife, et cetera, but I'm not a radical environmentalist by any stretch. And I think I'm the right guy for this time. And if I was to predict, I fully expect, given that Bud Pierce, the real serious opponent in the race, is in the primary, is not really a solid conservative. He's pro-life now, but he wasn't pro-life when he ran last time. And I've seen that before, and maybe it's genuine, maybe it's not, but I've always been solid conservative, and you can count on it. And I hope the listeners or viewers will look at my website, consider voting for me. In fact, I'm asking you for your vote. And I hope that 1 year from now, I'll already be a year into my administration and turning this state around.